What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. My name is Will. Joining me later in this video is going to be my co-host Eric. We're probably going to do a little bit of splicing back and forth. Hopefully, we'll see how this video ends up. It might just be me. We'll see. But we're getting into our starts, sits, stashes, and quits going into NFL Week 4. Just going to give you my list of people who I think are going to perform, won't perform, people I think are going to perform in the future, stuff of that nature. So let's go ahead and get into it. But before we do, make sure you guys do all that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we drop all of our latest videos. And also let us know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with these lists coming up, because things could get a little bit spicy. So let's go ahead and get into it. Starting off our starts, I'm going to go through each position group as per usual. At the quarterback position, I'm liking Daniel Jones against Seattle. I know he struggled so far this season, but Seattle so far 25th against opposing quarterbacks. I think this is a good opportunity for Daniel Jones to kind of bounce back and just have a good week. So hoping for the best there, but tempering our expectations. If I could give another quarterback who I think may perform this week, who probably isn't at the top of your list, it'd be a Russell Wilson against the Bears. Honestly, since week 16 when they got rid of Nathaniel Hackett, Russ has kind of been performing pretty well himself from a fantasy perspective. I know the team has been pretty garbage, but Russ as a player himself has been out there performing, so at least hopeful about those two. Looking at the running back position, I like Javonte Williams against Chicago. They've been 31st against the run so far this year. Javonte Williams taking the lion's share of the work in the backfield. Last week, I think he was down a little bit with a 46% run share, but at the same time, last week was what it was. It was a crazy week for the Broncos. Hoping they can bounce back in a big way against Chicago, in what should be a battle of the mid. Looking at the wide receiver position, we got Brandon Ayuk against the Cardinals, who are currently 12th against wide receivers. I'm just a big believer in Brandon Ayuk. It's just the week that he can come back. He's been practicing. He should be back healthy, should be back in his leading role. Obviously, Debo did perform last week, so there may be more of a split between the two, or it could be more even between the two. It actually was kind of even before Brandon Ayuk went down. But I believe in Brandon Ayuk as a talent, so I'm hopeful for him going forward. And at the tight end position, I've got Evan Ingram against the Falcons, who are currently 29th against opposing tight ends. That pretty much says everything it needs to right there. Hopefully this week can be a bounce back for the Jaguars as well. Evan Ingram can get a little bit more involved. And this is his opportunity to right here against the Falcons team, who has been loose against the tight end position.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Like Will said, we are going to be kind of jumping back and forth. So Will just got finished with his starts, and I'll give you mine as well. It does look like Russell Wilson is going to be our QB stream of the week. We've kind of come to a consensus there. He is on my list as well, playing Chicago, the 28th ranked passing defense, or against opposing quarterbacks, so I like him a lot. And then an honorable mention for me would be Matthew Stafford taking on Indianapolis. They have been 29th against opposing quarterbacks this season, very vulnerable and giving up a lot of points to that position. Obviously, Matt Stafford came off of kind of a down week last week. He was really under pressure going up against Cincinnati, but I think that he will definitely find his bounce back this week in Indy. In my running back position, Will mention Javonte Williams. He's one that was also on my list, taking on Denver in the 31st ranked defense versus opposing running backs. Some other guys that I think are worth mentioning, definitely Devon Achane, even though he's going up against a somewhat difficult matchup in Buffalo. They're the 12th ranked defense against opposing running backs, but after you put up a crazy week like he did last week, almost 50 points, depending on scoring format, he is one that I would continue to put in my lineup. I also just think that could be a shootout type of game between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. And then another kind of under the radar one, maybe for deeper leagues, I think Chuba Hubbard is worth keeping an eye on. They play Minnesota. They're actually 11th against the run, so it's not a fantastic matchup. But Miles Sanders is currently dealing with a groin strain. His practices this week have been limited, and then did not practice. And so we'll see what that looks like later on in the week. I guess this is probably going to come out on Sunday, so you'll have a good idea of what his status is going to be at this point. But even if he does play, I wouldn't be very encouraged to his output, so I think Chuba is worth mentioning. We'll go to the wide receiver position. Will mentioned Brandon Ayuk. I definitely agree with that, especially considering Debo's injury status. He was dealing with some rib soreness and an injury that he had suffered last week. It was questionable whether he was going to play at all. It's leaning towards him playing, it looks like. So I think even if he is going to play, he might be a little bit limited. They might not give him the full slate of reps, which would mean good things for Ayuk. On my side, I'm all in on Tank Dell versus Pittsburgh this week. They're the 28th ranked defense versus opposing wide receivers. They've also given up double-digit fantasy performances to opposing teams' wide receiver ones every week, including a 29-point outing for Brandon Ayuk in Week 1 and a 36-point outing to Devontae Adams in Week 3. Tank Dell has out-targeted and outproduced Nico Collins in each of the past 2 weeks. I really think that both of them are good starts, but I'm going to be putting my money on Tank in Week 4. Honorable mention for me, Tutu Atwell going up against Indianapolis. I mentioned Matthew Stafford probably having a good day. I think Puka is going to have an incredible day, especially because they play, I believe, mostly zone defense, and that's kind of where Puka can take most of his advantage. But, he's a lineup lock for everybody. I was trying to find guys that were more fringe, flex play type category, and I think Tutu fits that bill. So he's definitely somebody I would be starting this week as well. And then on to the tight end position. Will mentioned Evan Ingram. I don't know that I can really buy in. I can buy into Will's Evan Ingram, but I was going to say on the other side of the ball, Kyle Pitts. Can we talk about him real quick? Last time he was in England, what did he do? Over 100 yards, touchdown, maybe his only good game in the NFL? I'm joking. I'm still nervous about Kyle Pitts, but for the memes, I wanted to throw that one in there. My real kind of stream of the week, again, not somebody that I'm that I have a lot of faith in, but definitely somebody in a deeper league, maybe in a 2 tight end league that should be considered. Dawson Knox versus Miami. They're 26th ranked against opposing tight ends. I really do think that this is a shootout potential type game, like I mentioned. And so really that's all you can shoot for with these streamer type tight ends, is somebody that you hope is going to fall into the end zone. And that's kind of Dawson Knox's MO. We've seen Dalton Kincaid's usage not be quite to what we expected it to be. It's actually fallen a little bit in the past couple weeks. Again, I'm not super excited about Knox, but I think he's worth putting in your lineup if you're desperate. But yeah, so that'll do it for my starts of the week. Let's go back to Will for his sits.
Next, we're going to look at our sits, people who I think are not going to perform this week. At the quarterback position, I've got Dak against New England, who has been 6th against opposing quarterbacks, and they've played some pretty good quarterbacks so far and some pretty good teams so far this year, so it's tough to say they're a slouch at this point. So Dak, I'm sitting them this week. Running back position, I've got Joe Mixon against Tennessee. The Cincinnati Bengals have kind of just been struggling in general, but going up against Tennessee, who's 6th against the run, it's just not a great matchup for Joe Mixon, who's already been kind of inefficient. So kind of expect an ugly week from Joe Mixon. He may still be able to get it done, but it's not going to be pretty at all. So if you got options, I would sit Joe Mixon, but you probably don't have too many options in that case. Just something to be more temper your expectations. At the wide receiver position, I've got Zay Flowers against Cleveland, who have been number 1 against opposing wide receivers. Zay Flowers may still find some success since they don't use him as a traditional wide receiver. He's in more of a gadgety type of role. He does have a 30% target share, but only a 15% air yard share. So they're going to have to deploy him in some creative ways. They want to see him find some success. Otherwise, it's just a wide receiver going up against some tough competition with Rashad Bateman and Odell both out. So not the best outlook for Zay Flowers this week. And at tight end for our sits, I have Zach Ertz against San Francisco, who's been 9th against tight ends. Just honestly, the San Francisco defenses look really good, and I don't see the Cardinals being the ones to be able to crack the code this week. And I don't see Zach Ertz finding a lot of success. I think he may be a volume play. If you're playing in PPR leagues, like full PPR, tight end premium, he could be worth a play there because he does see a good amount of volume. But any other type of league, I would probably try to avoid Zach Ertz if I could.
Okay. And then for my sits of the week, the quarterback position, Will mention Dak Prescott. I'm all in on that one. I'm definitely not putting him in my lineup this week. For me, one that unfortunately I don't think many teams will be able to do just because you don't have a better option, but Lamar Jackson versus Cleveland is going to be a rough one for him, I think. Cleveland is 2nd against opposing quarterbacks so far this season. If you do have another quality quarterback, I would definitely consider benching Lamar Jackson, but Cleveland's defense has been historically good through the first 3 weeks. Baltimore's going to be without OBJ and without Rashad Bateman, and then also without their best offensive lineman and Ronnie Stanley this week. And then to make matters worse on top of that, Deshaun Watson is questionable for this game. he could be limited. He could have issues, or he might not even play, and then we see Dorian Thompson-Robinson get the start for the Browns. And the only reason I say that could be worse is that, if they're struggling offensively, if the Browns on the other side of the ball are struggling, then Lamar and the Ravens aren't going to have to force, more passes or whatever the case may be. They might just run it and kind of slug this one out. It could be a very ugly game. So yeah, Lamar Jackson, you might not be able to sit him, but I'd be worried about his output for week 4. The running back position, Will mention Joe Mixon. I do think that that's a similar type thing with Lamar Jackson. There's not a ton of people that are going to have other options, but Tennessee is definitely a difficult matchup. For me, I have Ramondre Stevenson on here, another guy that potentially could be in that category of you don't have a choice, but he's playing Dallas, who is 3rd against opposing running backs so far this season. He also just hasn't performed very well from an individual perspective. He's been less efficient as a runner and as a receiver than Zeke on his own team so far. Not something that either of us expected coming into the season, but it's the reality of the situation right now. So I'm worried about Ramondre. And then another one, harkening back to my starts list, Miles Sanders is on my sit list because of that groin strain injury. Obviously, at the time that this video is released, we might have already found out that he's been ruled out or he's playing, and I am of the opinion that he's going to be fairly limited and not very effective going up against the 11th ranked Minnesota run defense. We'll go to the wide receiver position. Will mention Zay Flowers, and I think that is a very good name to put on this list. I went a little bit more broad and really just put all of the receivers in this entire matchup in the Cleveland versus Baltimore game as guys to try to stay away from. Obviously, Amari Cooper is kind of in that top tier where you have to start him each and every week. But Zay Flowers, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, those type guys, I just don't expect that this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be ugly. I think there's going to be a lot of running the ball. It's going to be slow-paced, and so I wouldn't have high expectations for any of those receivers. And then lastly, the tight end position, Will mentioned Zach Ertz. I'm in full agreement. His usage has also seen a significant downturn through the past couple of weeks. So even, as a volume play, I'm not necessarily buying in on him in what's a really difficult matchup versus San Francisco. I have Dallas Goedert on here versus Washington. They are 5th ranked against opposing tight ends. He's another guy that we've seen with kind of some usage issues. I don't doubt that he's still incredibly talented. And, this is a guy that you probably want to continue to have faith in from, a season-long perspective. Later on, he's going to have better matchups. But this one versus Washington, I'm just not ready to buy back in quite yet. So let's go to Will for his stashes of the week.
In terms of who I have as stashes, I've got Mr. Josh Downs of the Indianapolis Colts. That one hasn't really changed too much. He's getting more and more involved with that offense as time goes along, and I just think he's going to keep getting more and more involved. We worried that Anthony Richardson's accuracy issues could be a problem for Josh Downs, but he hasn't really shown too much of that, and Josh Downs has still been able to find a lot of success with both him and Gardner Minshew, so hopeful things ahead for Josh Downs. My other stash is Mr. Marvin Mims. I think this one's just an easy one. He's producing the most out of any wide receiver on that team, really, and it's on very limited opportunity. So if you change that, I feel like at some point the coaching staff has to reward that. They have to make changes based on that. Marvin Mims should get some burn at some point this season. It's just a matter of when.
All right, so those were Will's stashes. I'll get into mine real quick. I do want to say Josh Downs and Marvin Mims, fantastic ads if they're available on your waiver wire, so I agree with Will there. Another kind of more obvious one, and one that's probably not available in most people's leagues, but if he is still out there, go get Quentin Johnston. We just saw Mike Williams go down with his ACL tear. He's going to be done for the season. It did seem like Josh Palmer is going to be the immediate producer and the one to be the immediate beneficiary to that loss of Mike Williams. But I think that Quentin Johnston is going to come along and really, he's not going to have a choice. Like, this team is going to be forced to use him. And so even if he's not 100% ready, they're going to put him out there. He's going to get opportunities, and I think he's going to get a lot of downfield opportunities as well. So he could be kind of a boom-bust option for you as the season goes along and hopefully develops into more than that. And then two names coming from the Cardinals, surprisingly. I have Kyler Murray on this list. He's going to be eligible to come off of the PUP after this week. We'll see what his actual practice status is and where the team is with him injury-wise, but especially in Superflex leagues, he's probably already owned in that case. But even in single quarterback, if you're kind of struggling at the position or just going streamers every week, I think he's worth a speculative add. This team has already outproduced my expectations, beating Dallas last week. Obviously coaches and players don't tank, it's the front offices that do. But I just didn't expect them to be talented enough to stay in games and win games this season. Clearly, they've proved me wrong. They're capable of it. And so if Kyler comes back, this might not be the worst situation in the world. So I think he's worth a potential add. And then his teammate, Rondell Moore. We saw some pretty exciting usage from him last week. He was used lining up in the backfield quite a bit. He got 3 rushes, I think, for 54 yards and a touchdown. I like that for him. He's always been kind of more that gadgety type player, but I think that's where he finds success. And so if they continue to kind of deploy him like that, he's not going to be somebody that I'm counting on as a lineup lock, but he's certainly worth a speculative add in my opinion. So that'll do it for my stashes. Let's go back to Will for his quits.
And then we're going to take a look at our quits. We've got Mr. Jamal Williams of the New Orleans Saints. This one is more so, he hasn't played great this year. Alvin Kamara's coming back. Kendre Miller's there as well. I think if there's anyone who's going to get phased out of this backfield, it's going to be Jamal Williams. So, Jamal Williams' season officially probably over, even though it never really started. And another running back I have on my quits list, I have Joshua Kelly. I know week 1 was very encouraging looking for Joshua Kelly, but I'm not a huge believer in him myself. There's a chance that Eric could see this part of the video and completely disagree with it. That's his opinion. But Joshua Kelly, to me, he's not performing when he has the opportunity to right now, and he's had a golden opportunity to. Last week against Minnesota was a great opportunity. He didn't do much with it. I don't know what to make of that because Minnesota is not good against the run. So it's just a matter of I don't believe in Josh Kelly going forward. Austin Eckler's going to be back at some point soon. Maybe if Austin Eckler's back, maybe the combo of those two is better than just the part of Josh Kelly. But as long as I think Josh Kelly's the sole person in this backfield, I'm not touching him. So I guess take that for whatever it is. Maybe it's not a full quit, but it is somebody who I am losing faith in at a very, very rapid rate.
All right, so that was Will's quits. I totally agree on Jamal Williams. He was also on my list. Like he mentioned, Kendre is probably going to get more burn. Alvin Kamara is coming back. Jamal just does not look the same this year. So I'm in full agreement there that he's probably somebody you can drop and not worry about. He also mentioned Josh Kelly, and he also mentioned that I might disagree. It's not that I disagree. He's not good. He's never been good. I drank the Kool-Aid after week 1. I thought that this offensive scheme and the offensive environment around him was going to be enough to propel him towards fantasy production. These last 2 weeks, we've seen that that's not the case. The only thing that I'm thinking of, and this comes from no research, no data, none of that, just I feel like this is going to be one of those games where everybody writes off Josh Kelly because of these past 2 weeks, and then he goes off in a fantastic matchup in week 4. I could be totally wrong, and also it's one of those things where if you start him, it's not going to work. If you sit him, he's going to go off. So it doesn't even really matter. I'm fine with you dropping him or keeping him on your roster one more week to see what happens. Likely after the bye, Austin Eckler is going to be back, and he's not going to mean too much anyway. The only other guy that I have to add to this list is going to be Brandon Cooks. I hate to say it, he was one of the guys that I was drafting a ton of later in drafts this season, but he just hasn't really panned out. He's dealt with a little bit of injuries, but he's always a little bit banged up. I just thought that the volume was going to be there, and I thought this passing offense was going to be slightly more explosive. Just not the case so far. So I'm ready to cut bait from Brandon Cooks, especially considering how many young, talented wide receivers there are out on the waiver wire right now. So I think that'll do it for our starts, sits, stashes, and quits. Thank you all for watching. This is going to be the end for me, but let's get back to Will for the conclusion of this video. Peace.
So with that being said, thank you guys for watching this far into the video. As always, do that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so that you know when we drop all of our latest content. Hit us down in the comments below if there's anybody you disagree with, anyone you agreed with, anyone you felt like should have been on this list that we left out. Let us know in the comments below, and hit that like button. It's free, and it's the best way to get our stuff out there in that YouTube algorithm. So please do all 3 of those things. And also check out the sponsors and all our links down below. Dynasty Owner, the Fantasy Football League winners who we're partnered with other content creators. Sleeper, where we are sponsored by them. If you use our promo code FFLW, they'll match your deposit up to $100, 100%. And Do Numbers. Grab you guys some cool new merch, stuff like that. But just check out those links down in the description below. And hit up the link to our Discord if you want to join the community. We got some great guys in there. Love talking football, love talking fantasy. So if you're interested in any of that, check it out down below. But as always, if you guys watch this far into the video, we love you. And we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.